Good evening, Oregon. My name is Michelle Walker, and I'm just here to introduce Kim Thatcher and Mark Thielman for a live discussion. We have Mark Thielman running for governor, and Kim Thatcher, I believe, is running for the senator?
State senator.
State senator. All right. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
I'm just going to, sorry, everyone. I'm going to pop out.
All right, looks like we're up and rolling. Well, Senator Thatcher, welcome. It's great to have you. You know, every time I see you, you look younger. It's probably because you're not running a statewide race. What do you think?
That does add years to running a statewide race. I did run a statewide race, so then I had to go,
That's right.
Get mud maps and things afterwards.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm going to put those cucumbers on my eyes. I think it'll work. So, well, it's been, campaigning is a lot of work, and it's a big commitment, as you know, and it's kind of an interesting season that we're in. As you know, we're in a brand new year for districting, and I thought it would be good if you could just let people know a little bit about how your district changed with the Democrats playing the shenanigans where they said, yeah, we'll give Republicans equal representation, and then they said, oh, just kidding. So how did that work out for you?
Well, that was for the congressional districts they were making that big promise on, and so instead they built. So now we most people may or may not know that we have an additional congressional district. It's Congressional District 6 now. We used to only have 5, and so they made 5 of the 6 districts Democrat favoring instead, and then one that's probably going to go Republican. So it's not real even that way. It's funny how the people who talk about gerrymandering and all that make a big deal about red states who might have a situation similar, but they never mention the blue states that have a situation like we have right now. But my personal state Senate race is going to be in a new seat because of redistricting. And so I'm in a new district I live in without moving, Senate District 11, which is now represented by Peter Courtney, who is not running again. So it's like an open seat, but I am a sitting state senator, so I'm sort of an incumbent, but I would technically be an incumbent for District 13, which moved 2 borders north into the Portland area.
Oh, wow. Sounds like the Democrats were serving themselves rather than creating something that's fair and balanced. What do you think?
Oh, well, it was no shock. I mean, obviously, it was no surprise, even though they promised some equal representation on the redistricting, at least on the House side. I mean, you didn't have that on the Senate side, and then they blew up the whole equal representation thing at the end anyway. So, yeah, it was no shock.
Well, and I think it's important for people to know, it's really about character of leadership. And, if you in the old days, you gave your word to something, it kind of bound you. In this case, it's the Democrats engage in brinksmanship, in which we give our word and it kind of binds us until political expedience says do something different. And, I've met a lot of people all over the state, and they ask questions about that. So I appreciate you kind of sharing. And a lot of them people aren't necessarily familiar with the term gerrymandering, which, as you know, is the intentional drawing of district lines to favor one party over the other. And I know it exists nationwide in both parties, but would you say that this year's redistricting, or this decade, because it's every 10 years, it's timed with the census, would you say that Oregon would qualify, or our progressive friends on the left would qualify as having committed and participated in gerrymandering?
To an extent, especially with the congressional districts, I think that is safely said. But there are so many people who don't identify with either party right now that it's not the same division we used to have. There's so many people that are registered. Well, they're registered to vote, but they're not affiliated. They don't affiliate with Republicans or Democrats. So that's a huge section of the population that is kind of left out of the conversation, really. That's why I think an independent redistricting commission would be a good idea.
Okay, and I kind of agree with you on that. So just so everybody knows, it's the non-affiliated voters are kind of in the middle. They're not Democrats, they're not Republicans, they're unaffiliated. That means that they don't assign themselves one party or the other. And based on the last piece of, I guess it would be digital data that I looked at, they're estimating that NAVs are about 40%, about 4 out of 10 Oregonians are not associated as a Democrat or Republican. Mm-hmm. And that Democrats have lost a couple percent, which is kind of a surprise, and Republicans have picked up about 1.5%, almost 30%. So Republicans. So that's kind of an interesting mix. You know, obviously there's a margin of error on that, but if we have the majority of Oregonians, the largest quote non-party party, non-affiliated, do you think that's going to affect voter turnout, and how does that affect voters in the primary?
It's a tough question, because with automatic voter registration, where people go and get their driver license, or in some cases a voter, or not a voter ID, but a state ID, they're automatically registered whether or not they feel like they ever want to pay attention to politics in any way, shape, or manner. So they're automatically voted, at least before somebody expressed an interest by registering themselves. They would go into the county clerk's office or fill out one of the forms, and they would register themselves. But since it's now just automatically, it's harder to pinpoint those new voters coming in who will actually vote, because so many don't. It's just a little more difficult to campaign, I will say. But well, I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, and I appreciate you kind of clarifying that, because it's important that people kind of get the background on how political dynamics in Oregon have changed really in the last 4 years. It's been the rise of the non-affiliated voter. It's an increasing portion. The most interesting thing I think that I would like people to understand is that we still only Republicans can vote for a Republican in the primary, registered Republicans, and only registered Democrats can vote for Democrat candidates in the primary. And that leaves a very large chunk of Oregonians who are kind of locked out of the choice system. So one of the things that I think is important is for people to check their voter registration. I don't know if you'll agree or not, but I think it's really important. And then for folks to look at the current situation. I'm going to be a little bit of a sales pitch here, but if you look at gas prices, you look at diesel, fuel costs, you look at the increase in groceries, increase for general commodities, etc. Inflation being what it is. And then you look at the general kind of consumer price confidence, which is being somewhat down, considering that the economy is still kind of filled with money and that there is opportunity out there. The problem, of course, is we have supply chain restrictions. We have the war in Ukraine, and it's creating a bunch of havoc that has only inflated inflation even more. So what I think people need to understand is that a lot of this stuff is related to policies that our government, both state and federal, have decided to follow. And for example, we were energy independent 2 years ago, and now we're asking Iran to sell us oil at very high prices. Can you give us a little flavor on how some of that might affect Oregon, and why it's important for people who are not affiliated to maybe consider registering Republican and participating in picking the right candidate so that they have more choice when it comes to the general?
Right. Well, what you mentioned with the gas prices is mostly a federal issue, but I think in Oregon, we can do some things to alleviate that. We could do a tax holiday. We could look at, something to help lower the costs of living for folks. Right now, I think it's very important to get people to, look at their government. I mean, I can't say that unequivocally that Republicans are the answer to everybody's problems, but I can say almost without doubt that the Democrat policies are at the root of most of the problems that we are experiencing right now. So that is the number one issue right there, that, we get a majority in there who will at least turn this Titanic around. Right now, we are getting close to hitting some icebergs and going down. We need more balance. It's just simple as that. And that's why it's important to pick Republican candidates at this point.
And that's a really good point about balance. And, for me, it's about people being able to participate and having some balance. Balance is so critical. Would you say in the last, I don't know, we connected to legislature here in Oregon was during 2010 through 2012 there when all that was going on. And it certainly did help because it forced the progressives to the table because the Republicans had enough seats in the House that they could actually be quite disruptive if they didn't work together, didn't negotiate. So, I'm looking back and reflecting, I think that was a time where I did see the most balance. And then it got progressively worse as Republicans have kind of whittled away and lost seats over the years. And the goal is that we're in a situation now to kind of take that back. And I'm hoping that we vote for real good policy change. I want to really encourage Oregonians to get involved. And obviously, if people are watching this podcast, they're probably plugged in and hoping to know. But it's good to give people the background. And I'll segue a little bit because you mentioned that, well, there's not a guarantee that voting for a Republican is going to be the solution, but it certainly won't increase or continue the problem. I want to give people a little bit more confidence in that in the sense that we have really two options. We have two flavors of Republican. As you know, we have, see, there's my dogs. That means the UPS guys here. So that we have kind of grassroots people who aren't necessarily politicians like myself. They're not always tied to the big party money, which I'm not. I haven't taken any money from Pfizer. Yay. And some of my opponents have, as you know. And then there's the more established side, people who've either served in public office or are running for governor or have those connections, those business connections, or have been connected to the system for a very long time. And that's a little different flavor. Do you see those two halves in our party right now, in the Republican Party?
We have a lot going on in the Republican Party. We've had a lot going on in the Republican Party for a long time, where it's been sort of if you just want to look at the party, I wouldn't look at the values, look at what Republicans stand for, look at the platform, look at the things that we want to promote. We want to help small businesses. We want to make it easier to make a living in this state. We want to make it better for kids to go to school and get a good education. We want to make sure, that we're upholding constitutional rights for everyone. For instance, I mean, there's a list, but I think that the grassroots still stick with that. And the grassroots are the ones that mostly have put the platform together. But there are some others who are, they've got the money. They're not maybe as active as the grassroots and setting up the platform and all that, but they have the money. So then therefore they are able to have so much more influence than maybe, some would like to see. And it's always a battle. I'm sure it's the same in the Democrat Party as well.
Well, as you know, legislating and writing laws and passing laws and all the negotiations that go on, it's much more complicated than most people realize, and it's a lot of work. You have to engage with people on all sides, and you have to cross the aisle, as you know. No matter what you pass, you generally have to cross the aisle at some point and try to collect votes. And what I want folks to kind of get a flavor of is one. That's why we want balance in the legislature, to make the two parties work together. Kind of forces that, right? But the other two is talking about party dynamics. You mentioned don't focus on some of the newspaper covered behaviors, but focus on the values and what the Republican Party tends to represent. And it's a little different than some of the stereotypes of the past. So here's what I heard you say, and I'll see if I can get it. We'll kind of go through this as we'll cover these talking points here. But it's really about freedom, family, and those kinds of values, and government being empowering to small business, medium-sized business, and everyday Oregon citizens. And it's about creating opportunities for all Oregonians from every walk of life, and creating an environment in which the system or the economy in general provides opportunity for people to access based on their own individual goals and dreams and hopes and wishes. And that the goal is we have an economy that's vibrant enough that creates so much opportunity that everyone has a choice to participate and be duly compensated. I think that is the goal of the Republican Party. How'd I do?
Yeah, I think that just about covers it. I think there's a lot of, I thought you're going to go, see, freedom, family. I thought you're going to add in faith too, because really not
Family,
everybody
freedom.
have a religion, but faith is important to people. And then when you start taking away their rights to exercise their faith, like has happened over the past 2 years, then I mean, that's obviously, well, to me anyway, unconstitutional. We have a First Amendment, and that needs to be protected wherever you stand on the faith spectrum, I should call it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. You know, I had been in a couple of panels with my opponents, and it was interesting. I think we were at the River Church a while back, and it was a fascinating question that a visiting judge asked. He asked all of the candidates, what does it mean, freedom of religion, and what does it mean? And what was interesting is I gave a different answer than everyone else. And what I said to folks was, it means that the government can never, ever shut down your church, even during a pandemic. That's what it means. And I mean, in terms of relationship to that, that's freedom, right? Freedom of religion. The right to own a gun for the protection of your person in your home. That's the Second Amendment, right? The right to speak your mind with a reasonable degree of safety without risking being canceled. I think those things reflect a little bit of the values of the Republican Party. Being able to disagree agreeably, and but without retaliation and with respect. That's the civility aspect. Am I right?
Right.
We used to all of those. Yeah.
We used to call that the marketplace of ideas. Like, we believe in free markets, and that was called the marketplace of ideas, the free market, the free exchange of ideas. And now it's just like, nope, we're only going to hear from this side, and you get to go away and sit in the corner. And that's not right.
If you're not with us, you're against us. If you're not complying, you're an enemy.
Right. And if you question us, aren't you there?
Yeah. Look, one more thing. I'm sorry, I don't mean to dominate, but it's so nice to have you. I'm excited. So would you say that in terms of integrity and trust, that right now, the Republican Party seems to have finally woken up to the realization that government needs to empower and trust the people? In other words, government should give the people good information, aka tell them the truth, and then trust that they will use that information appropriately and wisely. I think we saw some of that in South Dakota. They never shut down. They never forced masks. People made their own independent decisions. People respected that. And they have the most vibrant economy because they never fully shut down. Right. And what that preserved was the maximum amount of freedom during the pandemic. But it also preserved that confidence that folks in South Dakota had in the government, the state government in particular. And then they're now reaping the benefits of having not decimated the economy, in which the state government tries to force compliance with whatever rules it creates. Am I right? I mean, would you say that really a good motivation for people to register and vote Republican would be for them to ask the question, do I feel like my current government leaders trust me to make my own decisions? And I would argue that the current leadership doesn't. But what's your take on it?
No, I think that is evident over the past 2 years. We supposedly are supposed to have, we're supposed to have 3 branches of government, and they're supposed to be separate and equal branches, and they're supposed to give a check on balance on each other. That's just, civics 101 right there, right? 5th grade civics. And what we have instead is the legislatures, and first of all, our executive branch is in one corner saying we need to do this, and this is for your good, and you will shut down. You can't serve food in your restaurant. You can't visit your mom in the hospital, all this stuff. You can't make this decision. Plus you need, the list goes on. And then we have a legislature that says, yeah, we agree with her. So they're over here. That's not, balance or anything. And then you have the judges. If somebody decides to sue, they can have a victory in their county municipal court, but by the time it gets up to the Oregon Supreme Court, 5 of the 7 judges were appointed by the executives. You have all 3 branches of government all in the same corner, and we don't have those checks and balances. We need the balance, and that is why we need more Republicans who are freedom-minded in the government.
Well, I think, you made an awesome point there. So basically, we've had one party rule for so long that now they own the courts, they own the attorney general's office, they own most of the legislature. And the natural checks and balances that our founders had originally intended have kind of broken down. And now we have kind of like a unirule, right? Where the courts back the governor and the legislature won't follow the Constitution because it said 60 days in an emergency that they had to be convened, and that did not happen. And it was the consent of the majority party that prevented that from happening. And to me, that is, it's an affront to our state Constitution. And what it led to was kind of a hubris that came out of the governor's office that washed into the Oregon Health Authority, which is massively powerful in such a short time. It's almost 40% of the budget. It was created in 2015, and now it's 40% of the budget. That's insane. But literally, and I'll bring this up. When we went to when I saw the science come out in November, December about that masks have no effect, and of course I work with my school board, and we go through winter break. We come back in January, and people were done with masks. What was bothering me was the fact that it was very clear that they didn't protect kids from Omicron spread, masks, especially cloth masks, as you know. But the science was very clear that it was doing harm and damage to kids. And we saw this in LC when we went to mask optional. About 90% of the kids showed up without masks. And the whole building was absolutely quiet all week. Referrals to the office for behavioral issues were way down, like 300%. I had a principal call me 2 days in because I was out of the office on a Wednesday. And I said, hey, what's going on? We get because I was expecting usually if you get a call and you're out of the office, there's some reason. And the principal said, oh, no, I'm just calling because that's the problem. Nothing's going on. All the teachers are teaching. All the kids are learning. Everyone's behaving. And I'm bored. So I called you.
That's a good problem to have.
Well, it's profound. You see why? Masks create anxiety. They create conflicts. The look, who's your mask up, that kind of thing. And it was raising the generalized anxiety. So for me, an ethical school board looking at the science, ethical superintendent says no. And so obviously, we took back local control, and the entire weight of the Oregon state government poured down on my head. Leadership was very lonely for a few weeks. But what does the data say? Well, every week on week, we had a continued decline in Omicron while not wearing masks. I think we pretty much proved to Oregon, the entire state, that we've been lied to. So I'll ask you this question. I ask people this a lot. I asked the K2 reporter the other day. It's funny, they edited it out. Isn't that weird? Do you like being lied to, Senator Thatcher?
I absolutely do not like.
I have not met anyone. I was talking to an Antifa person.
Anyone likes to be lied to? No, nobody likes to be lied to. It's absolutely, you feel betrayed. You feel like you can't ever trust anything else they say.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what's interesting, because as I've gone around the state, especially in the more rural sections of the state, even in the kind of urbanized rural sections like Medford and some of those areas, there's a lot of people who feel like either they're not listened to or they're being directly lied to. And the reason I think, and the thing that when I probe people and say, hey, give me some specifics. One gentleman in Medford answered it really well. He said, well, they want me to believe their narrative instead of my own eyes and my own experience. And I think that's a powerful thing, because when, what is the duty of government and leadership? It's, according to the Constitution, it's to be limited and to empower the people, not to coerce or control per se, but to create a maneuver box, right, of laws that allow people to maneuver in, through society and hopefully be empowered to pursue the American dream. So I want to make sure I'm getting to all our cool stuff here. I think we've covered most of it. So I would argue Republicans in general tend to be pro medical freedom. In other words, we need to not force people to get injections. I think we saw the downsides of that. I think Republicans in general tend to be pro school choice, that parents are the foremost curators of their children. that children belong to the parents, and that we, the government, empower and trust the parents to raise the next generation of good citizens. Does that sound kind of like our party? Because I know that's not what I've been getting from Governor Brown.
Well, definitely educational freedom, medical freedom, economical freedom, the freedom to earn a living. Well, that was certainly taken away. The freedom to choose your school and how you're taught. That certainly, in your medical freedom, what goes into your body. If you have to have something injected into you, you should have a choice as to whether, especially if it's an emergency use only and is experimental, it should be given. You should be given the choice.
Well, what was really interesting about choice is, that there was one of the biggest half-truths I ever saw. Was I was in a meeting with Colt Gill, director of the Department of Education, appointed by Governor Brown. The guy is, in my opinion, the first I'm going to fire when I'm governor. He's going to be first, and then Dr. Seidlinger is going to be second. And hopefully they'll resign when I'm elected. But I think it'd be better if they let me fire them. It'd be more fun. And I mean this real directly, because I watched both those people get into a meeting with superintendents that was embargoed, meaning that it wasn't open to the public. And they told us there's going to be exemptions and we're going to respect people's religious choices. And then 4 days later, exemption became exception. And then I saw the lie in which they were basically fooling people into participating in due process by telling them they had to follow these steps if they wanted their exception to be approved. Well, that's crazy. It's a half-truth. Half-truths divide. Half-truths are paramount to a lie. And there were so many people that went through those processes and lost their job and were just dumbfounded. They reached out to my campaign by hundreds of people. I did a bunch of little podcasts and tried to educate people about the difference between exemption and exception. Yeah. But our government is so incompetent, Senator Thatcher, and maybe you didn't know this. Actually, I think I sent you some emails. I kept you in the loop.
One or two.
That I was able to get, because they required that we use the OHA page. Well, I was able to break into that by putting it into a Google Doc and then reopening it as a Microsoft, and it unlocked it. So then I rewrote it to say exemption. And I gave all of my employees full religious exemption. I respected their choice, respected their rights, and laid nobody off and fired nobody. And what was really amazing is when other schools were desperate because they lost 20% of their workforce, in LC, we were rolling. See?
And so many people who are sick, right?
Well, yeah. And the thing that really gets me is when it came to making special rules for the accepted, right? That was the government asking me to discriminate between vaxxed and unvaxxed. Well, if I'm going to do that with my staff, that means I'll do that with my kids. So what are we modeling for children? Yeah. So I didn't do it. So I told everybody, here's your new rules. Your rules are on Sunday, you have to assess your symptoms. That was it.
Basically told my employees that I was not going to, if they did not want to conform to whatever is being, even though they didn't fall under a mandate per se, there were some jobs being in construction that were requiring it. And I just said, you will get an exemption. Just file it with me. Give me your status. But what was sad is on some of these teachers and medical providers and others who lost their job because they refused to comply with that vaccine mandate. Most of them were not eligible for unemployment benefits to help bridge them to, the time to get another job. That's what I thought was really tragic as well.
Well, it was about punishing your enemies and treating the people that didn't comply as bad. To me, that was out of control, overreaching government. It is a form of hubris and judgment that does nothing but divide and hurt. Yeah. Which is why when I'm governor, I'm going to compensate people who lost their jobs and their businesses. And believe me, at the rate our government underestimates the revenue that the economy will generate, so to the tune of 2.4 billion rolled into this short session, am I right? I think there's going to be enough money to go around. And my whole point of that is that we're going to stop lying to people. We're going to stop purposely underestimating. We're going to stop telling half-truths. And then we're going to institute real solutions and real policies to big issues. I'm big on school choice. I trust our parents. I want parents to decide what educational pathway they get. And you know, I'm a believer that some of that taxpayer support should follow those parents, even if it's homeschool or parochial school or private school. And the reason is we want to create an environment of school and educational innovation, because only through school choice, in my opinion, can we meet 100% of student needs. No such thing with people, and maybe I could be wrong. I should ask you. I mean, I'm assuming you're over 25 years old. Okay, I'm assuming that. Let's just assume you are. In your 25 years, Senator Thatcher, have you ever seen one thing that meets the needs of 100% of people?
Never, never, ever, ever. And the most important minority is the individual. Yeah. So we need to be able to meet the needs as well as we can as a government of the individual.
And I appreciate you bringing that up. I was in a panel debate just last week and having a good time. And I was asked in quite detail about, how would you solve, in a Q&A time, I should say, how would you solve homelessness? And what was amazing was I just simply answered the question. I said, well, there's a couple of issues. One, we try to stop enabling homeless by decriminalizing drugs and providing tents and things for people to camp, and being soft on violations. So that's one thing we want to do. Number two is we have to recognize that these are full-fledged human beings who are hurting or suffering. There are a small portion that want to live that lifestyle, but most don't. And I said, so we have to go to each homeless person, and we have to get to know them individually, find out their name, see if they've got family, what are their indices. Because let's say they're a veteran, they have PTSD, they have a lot of anxiety as a result, and they have a drug and alcohol addiction. Okay, there's 5 indices. Let's get my hand out here. 5 indices. If you're going to help that person and connect them back to work and get their feet under them and get them the supports that they need, you got to treat all 5 simultaneously. So my point is I'm going to massively amplify that kind of outreach while beginning to make it less palatable for people to camp anywhere they want. And because there's needles in the park. I don't know if you noticed that. I was just down in Portland a couple weeks ago, went needle shopping. Guess what? They're there in the park. This was on the towards Gresham. And what was amazing is there were tents and camps. And when I talked to people in the neighborhood, they said, we don't take our kids down to the park to play anymore because we don't want them stepping on needles. And when I said to these young people, it was a young couple, I think they're 28 and 29, they got a little kid. I said, do you know that you are less free because of this problem that the government has created? Now you should have seen their eyes popped out. I think that was the first time they put a connection together. Hey, wait a minute, we're less free. We're not free to bring our child down, to let them play at the park, at least not without scouring for needles. Am I right?
Yeah. So
when we talk about, and getting back to that gentleman, it was really hilarious because he came up afterwards and he said, you're the first person to answer my question. So I want to segue into that. One of the criticisms of politicians is that they don't answer questions. Can you talk a little bit about, I think, why there's an environment right now, a political environment in Oregon that actually probably requires Republicans in particular to answer the questions?
Okay, let me see if I understand your question. Okay. So
let me help you out. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to transition, although very poorly, into the 3-way race dynamic that's setting up, in which we have probably Tina Kotek or maybe Tobias Reed, right, which are hardcore, longtime legislators, bureaucrats, and politicians. And then we have Betsy Johnson, who is a career former senator, Democrat, who's now running as an independent, but she is a 20-plus year career politician. And then we have this open, contested, and I'm talking about governors, of course, Republican primary for governor, in which we have 2 forces. We have some again, people who have served and are kind of associated with more establishment side, maybe have served in public service or been Speaker of the House or the minority leader of the House, that kind of thing, like Christine Drazen. And then there's these crazy non-politician types like myself, kind of grassrootsy, and who have had a relationship with the government and the legislature through policymaking. As you know, you and I have worked over the years together, but I was always in it, but never of it. And one of the reasons I'm running is because I'm like, well, not only do you need some help, because you've been doing a great job, in my opinion, of trying to represent real people, but that dynamic is so critical because Republicans get to choose between an establishment candidate or a grassroots candidate. And I think that's the dynamic I was hoping to get at, because when what I'm seeing on the grassroots side is I see grassroots people talking about faith, family, and freedom. And on the establishment side, I'm not seeing the same thing. See?
No, you're very right. That's a good observation. I mean, it's good to have experience, and people who have been in government aren't necessarily back. I've been there for a while too myself, but I do think that also being able to think outside the box, which you are obviously very capable of doing, and very nimble and flexible, and being able to respond to the different situations thrown at you when you're actually full on attacked. This is a good place to know how to fight back. I mean, if you don't know how to do that before you get into that governor's office, then you will have problems. And in order to change the state for the better, we need to push back on some of the things that have been thrown at us. And the other two, I don't know. Well, definitely the Democrat, whoever comes out of the Democrat primary, they're just going to be status quo, pushing forward with more and more of the leftist ideas. And I think you'll get more status quo with, with any establishment candidate, even if they emerge from the Republican Party. So I do think we need some creativity and flexibility and thinking outside the box. I think we have that in bucket loads of it.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's so important because, like when I get questions about, and we should probably transition, I think we might have some questions coming up. But so maybe we can see if anybody's out in the audience and see if they have some questions, and you and I can maybe tag team try to answer them. But the last thing I wanted to bring up is two other real important issues, and very short. One is the importance of election integrity and making sure that we have clean voter rolls and we're following the law, and that our elections are integuous so that people have confidence in the casting of their ballot and their vote. The other thing too is I think the restoring law and order. And I want to just make this pitch, and you can tell me if I'm crazy, but I believe that there's a relationship between law and order and freedom and liberty and safety. Because you want to be safe and you want to be free, and then you want to exercise your liberty in relation to not creating a huge issue for somebody else, right? That's the trade-off. And so without law and order, I think what we're having is more crime, less freedom, because people aren't safe to go to the park or go downtown Portland at night. I know I've been down there. It's literally like a zombie apocalypse. I did a little podcast. It was not what I remember from a few years back. And I think that these two things are really important. And I haven't heard a lot from our opponents on the progressive Democrat side about election integrity. Is there anything you want to, in terms of election integrity, you want to speak to that? And then what's your take on the need for law and order? I mean, do you think it's paramount?
Well, obviously, law and order has been degraded greatly, just even over the past couple of years, but it has been building up to that. And as far as having elections that voters can trust, I've been saying for many years, we need to audit every step of the election process, from registering to vote to counting the ballots. And we need to see where the loopholes are. We need to see where things can be gamed and tighten things up. We want easy elections, but we also want them to be secure. And I don't think that's asking a whole lot. But when you say that, the leftists come out of nowhere and just automatically throw names at you, and it's ridiculous. We just need to do it right. We don't do it right.
I think it's dubbed misinformation, but it is common sense, in my opinion, to audit. It's common sense to have things like voter ID, paper balloting, and then a chain of custody, so that at each stage where the ballot goes and that your vote is counted. I'm not sure that that's revolutionary, but I know some of my colleagues on the left are telling me that is misleading the Oregon public, and they're never able to tell me ever. They're never able to tell me how that's misleading.
Yeah, Right. Well, and I'm going to say that, venture way out on a limb and say, let's just say everything is perfect here in Oregon and there's nothing to worry about. Well, wouldn't you want to know that for sure? Shouldn't we occasionally audit everything, not just one little corner of the audits? Like, well, did it come out to the same count as it did last time? No, it needs to all be looked at, not just whether,
Well, here's something interesting. You seem very comfortable with the auditing of Oregon elections. So why are you comfortable with that when knowing that our progressive colleagues like Governor Brown, Shamia Fagan, and Tina Kotek, and Tobias Reed, who I like to notably call too biased Reed, he's a very biased man. Why are they not comfortable with that? How come you are? What makes you different?
I think that they've been fed a line that they just want to parrot, that election integrity is not a thing. We don't need to deal with it. No, there's no fraud that takes place. It's a myth that was stated during, the campaign and for Secretary of State this last time. That's just a myth. And so therefore we don't ever want to check on it. But that's just dumb. When you've got something so important, there's going to be somebody who wants to have something favored in their direction. And so you need to make sure it's secure enough, just like we do with our dollar bills, our money, our currency. We want to make sure that we don't have counterfeit bills. You don't have a stack of counterfeits along with regular bills and count all of them as you having that much money. You pull out the counterfeits. You want to make sure that you have that system so you're getting a legitimate count. Regardless of how it comes out, just wants to be legitimate.
Well, what I heard is, basically what you're saying is, like same with, making sure the currency's clean and not counterfeited, is so that people have confidence in the bills they receive, so they get fair remuneration for the bills that they give in terms of transaction and exchange. So confidence seems to be an important element for good civil society and a healthy economy. Is that what I'm hearing?
Confidence, trust, integrity, accountability. You trust but verify. I think it was Reagan that said that. You want to make sure that we.
Well, perfect timing. I don't know if you can see this on your screen, Senator, but it says, question from the audience: how do we know you're both trustworthy? Right. And I would argue that your answer, because that's the answer I would give, is that, for me, there's two things you'll know. One is you'll see consistency between what I say and what I do. That's important. So promises I make, and then the way that I govern, you will see a consistent pattern there that in which one supports the other. And the other thing too is that you will see also consistency in terms of the many press conferences that I'm going to have, many more than Governor Brown, by the way, in which I give updates to the people of Oregon what the issues and what the pressures are. And the reason that I want to do that is that allows the very thing we're receiving right now. It allows the public to send in questions just like this one.
Yeah.
Which means that we in government, we're supposed to be responsive to large portions of the people. And if we could be responsive to just one person, depending on what that issue is. But if we're getting broad messages from a huge swath of Oregonians, we probably should listen to that. So if there's, a good half of Oregon that's upset about election integrity, a responsible government, that's our governor, who's trying to represent all Oregonians, would be responsive to that, and instead of minimizing it and saying you're crazy. Is that a little bit of the flavor? So I don't know how you'd answer that, but that's kind of how my answer is.
No, that's a great answer. I think that accountability also comes into play. We have public records. We have what we've said in the past. Maybe we've changed our mind on something, and being able to respond to those questions where I see this. What do you think about that? And why did you do that? And there might be more to the story, but the point is that I think accountability has to play into being a trustworthy government, because Like I said, trust but verify. It's up to people
Yeah.
to also verify that a person's being being trustworthy.
Well,
And
and I think, accountability takes on many forms. So like the person that asked that question, so when I'm governor, if they come up to me and say, hey, you've done these 3 things you said you do, but what about the 4th one? My job is to have an answer to that and to provide context and a timeline for when that'll get done. And, you can't do everything on the first day. I'm going to do a lot, by the way. But it's important that we allow and have that give or take. Now, if I was to get defensive and say, I've done so much, 3 out of 4 ain't bad, and to insert my hubris in that exchange, to me, that would be undermining the value of my role as governor and as a leader, because what I'd be saying is it's about me, not you. And what it needs to be about is it needs to be about the issues, about problem and solution. And it needs to be about an effective relationship in which the people are informing the government and the government is responding to the people. So I'll kind of summarize it with that. And to me, that creates trustworthiness, that people will begin to have confidence. They'll begin to trust the information that comes out of government, and they'll be a little bit more user-friendly, hopefully.
Reflecting your decisions that there are human faces behind all these problems that we're experiencing right now.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's so true, and we always have to remind ourselves of that. Next question, it says, will you be in Portland more? ? I'm assuming they're talking about me. We don't know enough about you and need to know who to vote for to fix what's happened here. And the answer to that is manifold. But the answer is yes, I will be in Portland more, as well as in Washington County. I have a whole series of events coming up. I will be taking about a week and a half hiatus where I'm going to hit the very counties that a few counties I haven't been to. So I'm going to be going all the way over and then down through Mount here and then back up through Josephine and into Deschutes and then back down to Jackson. I'm going to be it's going to be a blitz. But you can go to my website, Marc, M-A-R-C, C stands for conservative, for Oregon.com. And if you look at my events page, it kind of outlines some of the things that I'm going to be doing. Definitely, I've spent a lot of time in Clackamas County and a fair amount in Multnomah, but more in the suburbs, ironically, because that's where the events I've been invited to. But I've also done some work right downtown. I think, Senator Thatcher, you were at a gathering with me not too long ago. Remember that? Where 1,000 people were at the waterfront. It was amazing. And just in time for Antifa to show up. It was so nice of them. But they didn't disrupt the proceedings.
Well, not physically, not in any violent way. Thank goodness. It was just noisy. And it's funny, they went home right at 3. It was just like, okay, on to the next thing. Got clear out, go on to the next house.
Yeah, that was a bit of an adventure. In the old days, you could have called the police. They would have come down and cited those people for menacing. Yeah. See? Wouldn't that be nice? I'm just saying, walking down memory lane. Okay, next question. I hope that answered the question. Well, I hope that answered the question for the person. And, Portland is a huge reservoir of people who want to have change. And I've met so many Democrats who have been interested in, several have ironically have volunteered and joined my campaign that are from the downtown Portland area. So I'm going to take that feedback directly. I'm going to let my campaign people know, and we'll try to schedule more events in Portland. Whoop, can you put the question back up? I forgot to read it. One more time. Whoop, away Friday. There it is. Whoop, close. It says, how will you both work together to help achieve a safer Oregon? Oh, I can't wait.
I know.
Okay.
Great.
Do you want to take that one first? Because I'd love to.
Well, I was going to say we both have ideas, and we can work on legislation to get that passed. And a lot of it doesn't require legislation. A lot of it just requires some leadership from the top, from your office. And that is what we're going to do, and whatever we need to do to support you in your role as the executive of the state, making sure our state is carrying out correctly.
No, it's excellent. And so I appreciate you highlighting. There is a relationship between legislators and the governor's office, in that one doesn't ubiquitously control the other per se, but the relationship is important. So the weight of the governor's office in support of legislative initiatives is helpful for the passage of that, right? For the healthy dialogue and discourse and creation of law or good law. The other thing too that's real important is it helps as a senator if the governor has your back, wouldn't you say?
I don't never experienced it. Imagine it would. Yeah, I think it would be a plus.
But you've been told, right? Anyway.
I've been told. Yeah, I get
Yes.
jealous of some of these other states sometimes.
Yeah, and so the thing is, there's always room to work together, and that includes members of the other party.
True.
I think the most important thing is that for my office to provide is to provide an impetus towards solutions rather than kind of the same old or agenda driven topics, but saying, how does this benefit the everyday Oregonian? And if we pass this, what constitutional lens did we apply in the writing of that? How does it, or if, and then if we implement this 3 years from now, what are we most likely to see? Because you see, I'll give people an example. 4 years ago, I testified against certain things, and it was quite fascinating. The minimum wage, actually it was 7 years ago now. I talked about the minimum wage and then the increase in taxes on business that the Democrats passed in 2015. And I spoke way out adamantly against it. And the reason is, as I said in my testimony, hey, 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, what we're going to see is businesses moving out of Portland and setting up shop farther out. It's actually going to create more housing issues and more commute issues. And it's going to, and that was the same year they did rent control, by the way. So they did those triple whammy. And then and I said, and what these rent control laws will do within 4 or 5 years is they will drive mom and pop renters out of the market. People will sell because they're too regulated. They have to pay to move somebody if they want to evict them, which is insane. And then they have to absorb the damage that renters sometimes do to the house. And so what happened is a lot of people couldn't afford it. So those houses either got sold on the real estate market, or they were bought by large conglomerate, big companies, real estate investment companies that don't always have Oregon's best interests in mind. You know that. Mm-hmm. So that's an example of why we want to break that cycle, because it's not just when something's passed, as you know, Senator. Sometimes it's a few years after the implementation where the real negative effects begin to show up. Do you remember some of that? I didn't mean to bring up bad memories.
I was just trying to think. I think I was on that committee that brought forward the minimum wage increase. I wasn't on the rent control one, but I think we've worked together for a heck of a long time. And so
you had an amazing, not to inflate your ego here, but the first time I think I saw you speak on the floor of the Senate, you were speaking about those very outcomes that would evolve from, or be descendant of, the implementation of that minimum wage. Even though they staggered it, and everything you said, by the way, came true within 3 or 4 years. And it was amazing how no one really debated you. You said your thing, and then thank you, Senator, and then the Democrats went up and passed it. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. I talked to somebody the other day who is on the board of a place that does plays, community plays and things like that. I'm like, the legislature is kind of like a play in a lot of ways. It's just all staged in theatrics, and what the outcome's going to be. How the story ends. 99% of the time it ends how you expect it.
Well, that's sad, but it's important that people hear that. And it says here, we're going to segue to this next question. How can we dismantle OHA and stop the public colleges vax mandates? Oh,
yeah.
Well, it's very simple. Okay, let me give you an example. Good leadership says the pandemic's over. Mm-hmm. People, you can wear a mask if you want, but we're done. And that means you undo the vaccine mandate, you undo everything that you did to supposedly protect public safety. But that's not what this governor has done. It's not what the Democrats or the progressives have done. What they did is they said, well, the polling says we're going to get creamed in the election, so we're kind of have to do. And then Al C did the mask thing, and we got all these districts now wanting to do this. We got the truckers up in Canada, and the nationwide polling looks bad. So they got the note from the Democratic National Committee, which you know all this happened. The public doesn't, because they didn't publish it, because the media is complicit. And they begrudgingly got together and said, okay, March 12th, we're going to do no masking. But that's not what they told schools. What they told schools was, you get to decide whether you want to keep masking. And by the way, if you don't keep masking, you're going to have all these new rules to follow. That's what they did.
Well, and that is done through the executive branch. So you would have some control over that.
Yes. And so since I do get to appoint whoever heads OHA, the first thing I'm going to do is fire Dr. Seidlinger, and I'm going to break up OHA into regional coordinated care organization districts. And then I'm going to decouple the funding to them and make them compete with each other to serve various areas of Oregon. It creates markets. It decentralizes OHA. It reduces its power. But here's my favorite part, and I cannot wait for this part. I want people to understand. Decoupling funding is critical for freedom. Because, for example, in ALC, they took away our federal funds, our ECR money, because the rule was, in order to get this money, you have to do everything we say. You hear that?
Yeah.
So even if we tell you to do something that you know is harmful to your students, you have to do it, and you can't question it. This is why coupling funding to those kinds of rules is so dangerous, and concentrating funding into one entity like OHA creates monopoly and inefficiency that is staggering to the conscience. And what's even worse is they took doctor licensing and they put it all together with all that funding, and they coupled everything together. And then they told doctors, you don't get paid unless you use remdesivir, even though you know it's a bad medicine and it can cause a certain percentage of people to get pneumonia and potentially die. See? And this is the part I want people to understand. Leadership matters. The people we elect and the way they approach the same problem is critical if you really want to have the ability for doctors to practice medicine without fear of losing their license. They're not free to take a risk on a off-label medicine or to work with you about your concerns about this or that. Instead, they were told, these are the things you're going to do, and it leads up to ventilation, and if they die, you get even more money.
Right. And
it is criminal.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you remember just a few years ago where HMOs were so, that was the topic. We got to get rid of these HMOs, these health management organizations like Kaiser and all that. We have to rein them in because they're telling the doctors what they have to do and not letting the doctors make their decisions and prescribe what they feel like their patient needs. Well, now we have it on steroids. We have the state of Oregon is the HMO now, telling doctors what to do and how to practice. So anyway.
Oh, beautiful point. I'm going to borrow that. Can I borrow those talking points for the campaign trail?
For free.
I mean, that is like political gold right there. For a non-politician like me, I'm thinking that's awesome. You just said succinctly what I should have said in my long soliloquy there. I want everybody out there to understand that our government basically took over healthcare, took over licensing, and now has total control to tell you what to put in your body, what medicines are approved and not approved, and how much, whether you can get a surgery or not. Theoretically, that's the direction that they're going. Am I right?
Yep, definitely is the direction they're going. There will be something on the ballot that the legislature sent there to have universal health care, but no funding. It's going to be a disaster.
Well, we know that markets and competition usually leads to better service, higher quality healthcare, and lower prices. The problem with healthcare, as you know, is it's not always allowed to operate under a free market, where the government begins to set the boundaries and to create rules that kind of, shall we say, taints what otherwise would be a fairly market-based or relationship-based transaction kind of process between patients and doctors and insurance companies. Is there any hope that we could break up OHA and maybe turn the dial back to some flexibility and some options in the healthcare system? Or what do you think?
I think it's a target-rich environment. How that would look, it's hard to say because it is so intertwined with federal regulations and federal rules. It is really a matted mess, if you ask me. But there's some things that could be done for sure.
Well, this is awesome. Well, listen, Senator, we're up to the top of the hour. Last question for the moderators: how can Oregonians best support you both? Why don't you start? How can they support you? You're running in your district for senator.
Well, and I see the whole state of Oregon as my constituent. Like I was helping, my office was really working almost 8 hours a day trying to hook people up that didn't get unemployment with this extended emergency unemployment that was supposed to be working, and gave people false hope and trying to get them hooked up because they were losing their homes and all that. So I don't care whether a person lives in the district or not, if there's a general problem that I can help them with, that they're not being able to get help from their own person. So having said that, we have the opportunity to have more balance in our Oregon state government. So whether or not you live in the Salem, Woodburn, Jervis, Kaiser area or not, I'll be there, voting for those things that you value. And that's going to my website would help. You can volunteer. Donations, unfortunately, money is very important in political races, and kimfatcher.com is the place to go. But as you know, it is tough to raise money in this environment with so many people running. And here's the thing: if we could just get the people who never donate, just to give $10 a month or something to their favorite candidate, something they can afford. Don't stretch it more than you can, but also keep in mind that your state's fate, your fate that is tied with the state is in question here, and we can make it better. We can do that. I know both Mark and I can help improve the state and preserve your freedom and make freedom legal again here in Oregon.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. See, it's hope. And here's what I'll say. I'll go all the way over the top. Okay, one of the guarantees I'll give any prospective voter maybe watching this is I want to ask you to go to my website. It's Marc for Oregon, M-A-R-C. C stands for conservative again. It's Marc for Oregon, all one word, F-O-R. So marcfororegon.com. And if you go to the website, there's a couple of key things because we're down to about 6 weeks before ballots go out. We've got about 2 months before the primary election day. And so it's really important that you do a couple of things, just like Senator Thatcher was talking about. Donations are critical for grassroots campaigns at this juncture. So we're starting to ramp up advertising, digital, TV, radio. And it's really important that we have a grassroots candidate make it all the way and be competitive in this race for governor, to give people a choice. So I want to ask everybody out there to do some introspection, some thinking. What is your freedom worth? What is your family worth? What is your values? What is integrity for voting integrity? What are all those things worth? And then, just like Senator Thatcher said, don't give away the farm, but take a look and see if you can make a commitment. So $10 a month or $10 a week. Right now, $10 a week would be helpful. And I want to challenge people to do that because it's going to take people opening up their treasure a little bit, contributing, and in grassroots, lots of little donations add up to appreciable amounts of money. And that's what we've seen in my campaign. I think we're pushing 1,400, almost 1,500 donors. That's a lot for a grassroots campaign. And I couldn't be more proud and more appreciative of every donation that comes in. The other one too is volunteering, signage, coming to events, helping to organize, answering phone calls, emails. All of those things are important for a campaign. And last but not least, being willing to pray. And I'm sorry to bring that out. If you're not a praying person, put some chakra or some juju or some mojo out there, because I believe that when people pray, it focuses them and it opens the universe up for good things. So I'm going to ask everyone to pray for my campaign and for Senator Thatcher's campaign. Pray that we continue to stay focused on solving real problems and providing and in defense and support of freedom, faith, freedom, and or faith. Sorry, man, we're gonna. Too bad we don't. This is live, so I can't undo it. Faith, freedom, and family. Those three things are so important, and to me, that's the three pillars of what it means to be a Republican here in Oregon. So, all right, with that, I think we'll close. Senator Thatcher, thank you so much for spending this time.
Yeah, you bet. We just have to remember that we actually have more in common with our neighbors who are Democrats than you'd think, but there's so many people out there trying to divide us and pit us against each other. Let's just not fall for it. Let's not take the bait.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody for watching, and thanks for supporting these campaigns. Thank you for being interested and learning a little bit about the Republican Party and Senator Thatcher and myself, and about the real choices that we have coming up, and it's what's going to be a historic election here in Oregon. And with that, we'll sign off. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.